Let me tell you a little bit about Ariens Company. We're in northeast Wisconsin, Brillion, Wisconsin. We have 5 generations in our business now today. My son's included in that 5th generation. I would be the 4th generation. We count 4 generations up to me. Henry Ariens founded the Brillion Iron Works in 1893 when he moved up from Sheboygan on a snowy, wintry day with horse-drawn sleds and all the equipment he could pull out of Sheboygan, and was a blacksmith that turned into a foundryman. He lost that foundry in 1932-33 in the Depression, typical of many businesses that went under in that time of the year. But I always like to tell the story that Henry was sort of the old Dutch, stubborn, and then to mix it up really well, he married an Irish woman, and things really got interesting. But Henry didn't give up. He sort of was able to confiscate one lathe out of the plant before the bank locked the doors. He pulled that into his garage and started making the first tiller in America. So I'd love to show you pictures of that, but instead I'm just going to tease you with that. We have a museum up in Brillion, Wisconsin that's dedicated to the history of the company. And it also works along the lines of our STEM education so that we build curriculum around the museum and this tiller and how it worked. The first tiller was about 900 pounds, had a great big engine on the front, and it was a single-man operation unit. In those days, in 1933, as we came out of the Depression, lots of agriculture was happening in the Northeast and in the Midwest, and here all the way over to the Dakotas in greenhouses. But you had to till those greenhouses at least once a year for replanting, and those are days of true organic gardening, when gardening really was tilling the soil without any chemicals in it. So we had to take the bugs, the weeds out of those gardens in these greenhouses. So Henry sort of, thank God for Henry's determination and grit. He's got me standing in front of you here today. Over 100 years ago, we were founded. The Ariens Company and the history we talk about for us started in 1933 in that garage. With me today is my wife Julie and our daughter Elise and her new husband Trent. Last year we celebrated 3 weddings with our different children. Julie and I have 5 children. I'm giving you that little bit of background because just recently we went through a family transition. It was structured, it was difficult. It was where my parents had 9 children, and we went through a process of acquiring all the equity from the other 8 children in the family, plus my mother and my father's equity. Long process. I won't go through all the details in that, but maybe in the Q&A we can get into a little bit of those discussions because I looked at the questions and I think there's enough there to talk about. So I'll leave it at that. I want to spend a little bit of time on these 2 platforms, and then I'll tell you about who we are and I'll get out of here. I spend a lot of time on our core values. They're near and dear to my heart. When we bought a business down in Jasper, Indiana, I went down to run that business. Julie and I moved the family. We had just had our 5th child, Claire. I told Julie we were going to move, and that was a difficult day. It cost me a Baldwin piano, mini grand. But Claire got her first well baby visit, and we moved to southern Indiana. At first, didn't sound like a garden spot. But by the time we were done there, we loved Jasper, Indiana. It was actually a great place to raise our kids for a couple years. Being honest, I wrote these core values when I was running that business in Jasper, Indiana, and they didn't know me and I didn't know them. They looked at us as this big company that was acquiring this little company in Indiana. Rough numbers at that time, they were about a $16 million business. And so here we were, much larger, but in need of this very strategic acquisition we made. So one day in my whiteboard, because in the early days Julie was up north and I was traveling back and forth to Indiana, I'd stay late at night in the office, kind of like the guys in the shoe business. You stay there late because what are you going to do, right? You're not going to the bars. Julie wouldn't appreciate that. So I wrote on my board, be honest, be fair, keep your commitments, respect the individual, and encourage intellectual curiosity. Now, to be honest here, I stole some of these core values. I was reading a book by Jim Collins, Built to Last. I thought that book was fascinating, and it talked about companies that lasted 100 years, had a strong sense of value, and it had a strong sense of purpose. I think in a family business, this is the easiest statement to follow. Having core values are so much easier for us to articulate as a private company because we don't have the pressures of shareholders that are going to be on our necks every quarter. We can actually pause, do the right thing for the business and for the family rather than worry about this quarter's earnings. So being honest was, as you all know, the golden rule, but I think you'll find that sometimes this may be the hardest thing we do. When it's the most difficult and the most troubling conversation we have to have with either our children or our employees or our suppliers or other stakeholders who might have something of stake in the business. So often we don't tell the whole story. So when we talk about being honest, we're trying to tell the whole story, give everyone the full picture. Being fair is the next core value. It's a really difficult one. I'd say that the first core value is pretty black and white. You're either honest or you're not. And if you're not honest with us, I'm pretty impatient about whether or not you're going to be with us. But being fair is really great. What's fair to me is probably not fair to you, or may not be, right? There's this great big gray area. When we got into our transition with our family, valuation was a big issue. What is the value of the corporation? We'd had a long history of using a formula of our equity price. Lots of discussion about whether that's a fair price for this business. The short answer is that's the math. The math is very simple, but in these decisions, I always said, this is about 10% math and about 90% emotion. So fairness was sort of slow walking the honesty of the answer in the math of our equity formula all the way through all the individuals who were affected by that. Keeping our commitments, very simple. If you say something you're going to do, if you make a promise, keep your promise. I would say this is the one core value inside our business that we challenge ourselves with the most. Do we deliver product on time? Do we deliver the engineering project on time? Do we deliver the designs on time? Do we do what we said we're going to do for the customer? Are we there to deliver our promise every day? We try and execute very, very well. Good friends, the Bartolottas. We got to go to Harbor House last night, which we're in Green Bay. We get rare chances to go to a great restaurant. It's always fun to see great service in action. Had a wonderful meal last night with Julie, Elise, and Trent. And, we're a manufacturing business. When we watch a service business excel at keeping their commitments, we have a real example of how we need to serve our customers as a manufacturer. Respecting the individual, it's real simple. Just treat people the way you want to be treated. In business, you have managers who are the type A personality. They're going to run the bus right through the wall. And you have introverted thinkers who might go a lot slower and not drive the bus through that wall. We're trying to look for people who are going to balance all of this together. And then lastly, when those core values work in our business and they work in our family, we know that we'll stimulate the mind, it will stimulate thinking, and we'll encourage intellectual curiosity. We have a vision statement. It's quite simple. Yes, we make product. I'll show you some pretty pictures next, but really our vision is to have people who want to work for us, who love coming to work every day, who like the idea that we make your lawn beautiful and we get the snow out of your way, and they're going to astound you with everything we do. It's the high touch, high product quality that we bring through our manufacturing plants. So this is what we do. We keep your lawn beautiful. It's your most expensive asset, probably. It's the one thing that my wife always tells me, Julie always says, it's curb appeal. Your landscape is probably the first eyesight on your home. And when it's cut well, and I mean cut really well. So I was in a meeting yesterday and we had some of the competition. I'm not going to tell you the names. And I looked at their mower deck and they're over at a box store with orange signs on it. And we're looking at a 60-inch deck, and we're next to the competition's 60-inch deck. And I said, wow, our deck we have easily twice as much steel in this deck. And I'm talking to the engineers, are we sure? And they said, Dan, the cut quality on this 60-inch deck is second to none. This mower, I have a neighbor who uses it, just bought it, and he cross-cuts his lawn. So for you who aren't cutting grass with a zero turn, that means you go up and back, and then you come and cut it twice. Well, you don't want to cut your lawn twice, right? But he thinks it makes it look really good, and that's because it doesn't cut very well on the first pass. So, as we said, give the people more steel, right? This landscape should look beautiful, and you shouldn't have to take 2 hours to do it. You should do it in less than half the time, and that's what our zero turns do. This Ariens company is now focused on 2 plants in northeast Wisconsin, Burlington, Wisconsin to be specifically. We have about 1,500 folks today that work for us. Of that, about 120 are part-time. In the summer, we bring in college kids and high school kids that are over 18. We go into a big build on snowblowers, I think, which is my next picture. No. So I thought that was the best picture we had in the brochure this year. By the lake, beautiful landscaping. But we're also really best known for our snowblower. Our snowblower business is, we call it the King of Snow. We have the highest share globally in snowblowers. We ship them all over the world, from Korea to Japan, across North America, all the way through Europe. The European Alps had feet of snow this year. We had a tremendous year of snowblower sales, and that will carry into next year for us. A lot of people ask me about snow this year in the Midwest. Yeah, it was good, but it was late. If I could have a perfect snowstorm, I want it to snow when you're trick-or-treating. And then, we would actually like spring to start earlier than it did this year. We're okay if spring starts in March in Wisconsin, but I think we had snow well into April, even May. So it was long, but it was late. But we make a tremendous snowblower product, just like our zero turns. And as I say, we're the king of snow. We make the biggest stuff. We're very innovative in this product category. I'll just jump to the next one. And then our last product family is our Gravely brand. It's a business we bought in the early 1980s. So again, like taking care of your largest asset, whether that's your plant, an apartment complex, this is commercial mowing. This is a fairly labor-intensive business that, for our friend the futurist, we know is going to be stressed with finding labor. So we're working very hard on figuring out how to cut grass safely with less labor. We know that's a challenge. We make very big units. These products would go from $4,000 or $5,000 all the way up to about $20,000 mowers. And they cut grass fast, and that's what they're meant to do. So we can cut grass at about, we can safely travel at 13 miles an hour. We like to cut grass at about 9 or 10 miles an hour. So in the material handling business, Jerry, you know how fast that is. So that's our quick story on the products. I want to leave you with this sort of yin-yang. I use this a lot. It has a lot of different graphics on it. I simplified this. This is the balance that we try to bring to our business. It's the balance that I think we need to bring to a private family business. We want to be a world-class organization. We're going to drive for excellence. We're going to work very hard to be the very best company we can be. But we want to make sure that we do that in the culture that I talked about earlier, in a format where it's passionate people, astounded customers, living our core values, and going for 5, 6 generations. My job for the next 10 years is to figure out how to transition this business into Generation 5 as smoothly as possible. Thanks, Dan.